Brilliant. Joining me now is Jimmy Kent. Jimmy is the former chair of the Kingston Lib Dems. He's recently posted on his Facebook page, Jimmy Kent, radical centrist, that he is going to vote for the Brexit Party in these upcoming European elections. First things first, Jimmy, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks very much for agreeing to do this. So let's firstly start on that Facebook post, because was that where you first announced that you were going to be leaving the Lib Dems, or...?
Yes, I mean, obviously I'd had internal conversations to let people know in terms of my resignation, in which I expressed some different thoughts and some internal concerns with the party. But the statement that I put out on the Facebook was much more about the future than the past. It's about where we need to go. And in my opinion, that has to be Brexit.
The Lib Dems have taken this position where it was... Because, of course, you joined the party after the 2017 snap election, so it obviously had the referendum in the first place.
Yeah.
The slogan very much then was there was talk of a second referendum. So did you feel uncomfortable with that at the time, or did you kind of have other things with the Lib Dems that you agreed with and so were able to put that on the back burner? Or
Yeah, I think mostly for me, at the point that I joined, the Economist article about a vote for the Lib Dems in 2017 being a down payment on the future of radical centrist politics was really what had swayed me to join. I voted for Michael Howard in 2005, I voted Nick Clegg 2010, I voted Ed Miliband 2015, and I voted Tim Farron in 2017.
Right.
So I've swung across the spectrum, and I've never really been into the tribal stuff, but my politics has sort of coalesced around radical centrism, and I thought that the Lib Dems presented the best way of doing that. And I had voted Remain in the referendum, so it didn't feel that unnatural an alliance, and still to this day I'm very aligned with the Lib Dems on many policy positions. Then we got the exit from Brexit slogan, and my mind wasn't made up on a second referendum necessarily in the way that it is now, but over time I saw this creeping intolerance come through that you can see in the treatment of Norman Lamb and Stephen Lloyd. Even people within the membership, I remember when they were talking about Rachel Johnson's potential defection, and a local member at the AGM said, I wouldn't want to be in a party with her. And I found that kind of tribalism was exactly the sort of thing I was looking to avoid in the first place. So.
And you said you voted Remain in the referendum. Were you a passionate Remainer? Were you a bit on the fence? Because a lot of the Liberal Democrats, you would expect, couldn't conceive of voting Leave. Could you have potentially voted Leave in that referendum?
Potentially. I gave it a lot of thought. As I said in the statement, I think most people assessing that vote objectively, I think, would have had to concede big problems with the EU and the way that it's run, the common agricultural policy, the treatment of Greece and Italy and Spain to a degree. And so the question for me was, is it better to stay in and try and solve these problems from the inside? Or is it better to leave and either wait for these problems to resolve themselves or acknowledge that they might just be insoluble? But as I said in the statement as well, I think the behaviour of the EU in the last few years since we voted to leave has been one of the best arguments for Brexit. And I had friends and family and colleagues who voted Remain. I have friends and family and colleagues who voted Leave. 70% of the Lib Dem membership has joined since the referendum. But I think there's an assumption within the party that all of those people are motivated specifically by Brexit and especially by Remain. I think there's actually might be a shy Tory equivalent phenomenon within the Lib Dems, because I do know some people who've expressed reservations either politically or from principle with the whole way that the Lib Dems have structured their campaigning in the last 2-3 years.
If there is another referendum, if the Lib Dems get their way or the Green Party, how do you think you'll vote in that referendum?
It depends entirely on how that referendum is laid out.
Yeah.
I don't actually have a problem with a second referendum, but it can only reasonably contain a choice between Theresa May's Brexit deal, potentially another Brexit deal if one ends up on the table, and no deal.
So Remain not on the ballot?
Remain should not be on the ballot, because as I said in the statement, it's a fundamental principle of democracy that when you vote for something, you see that through, unless the consequences of doing so can be shown to be exponentially more disastrous than the consequences of not. And I think part of the problem that the Lib Dems are having is they chronically underestimate the damage that it will do to democracy if we don't deliver Brexit. Because this was the largest democratic exercise in our lifetimes, in I believe, the history of this country. And if all these people turn out to vote for one of the few times they feel like their vote can actually have an effect, and then that turns around and gets completely obliterated by people with entrenched conflicts of interest over that, you're going to get one of two things happening. Either that huge chunk of people becomes apathetic and they give up on democracy and voting. And there are many people, I'm sad to say, across the Remain side, who think that that's probably an okay outcome because they think that these people shouldn't be voting in the first place. Not an opinion people will express publicly, but I think privately it's an opinion that a lot of people hold. Or the other thing that happens, and I don't want to go Enoch Powell Rivers of Blood here because, I think we're still a long way from that. But the other thing that can happen is that people get incredibly angry. And that is a step in a direction that I don't think anyone wants to go. So I think that we have to deliver on what we voted for, regardless of whether the vote was a good idea or not in the first place, regardless of...
Do you think it was?
I don't. I don't tend to be a fan of referenda. Right. I think we have a representative democracy for a reason. But then again... maybe what the last few years have shown us is that you can't always rely on a representative democracy to deliver true representation. Regardless, we did put it to the people, and then almost every MP in this country stood on a platform of honouring the result of that referendum. So regardless of whether it was non-binding, regardless of whether it should have happened in the first place, we are where we are, and we have a democratic duty to make it happen.
Just lastly on that, before we move on to the Brexit Party, I just want to ask, so you mentioned that obviously a second referendum, in your opinion, shouldn't have Remain on the ballot. Mm-hmm. As we know, with the kind of parliamentary arithmetic at the moment, the people pushing for it, the Lib Dems and quite a lot of Labour, and obviously even the Labour leadership are now talking about a confirmatory vote. If there was one with Remain on the ballot, do you think a lot of Leavers would vote in that referendum? Do you think people are so angry? Because people seem to be so excited about voting in these European elections, both for the Brexit Party or the Lib Dems, depending what side you fall. Firstly, do you think people would turn out to vote in that referendum if there was a Remain on the ballot? And would you consider voting Remain in that referendum yourself? Or is Remain now off the table for you? Whether or not you thought it was a good choice at the time, would you vote for a form of Brexit?
Well, okay, so on the first sort of point, I think... Again, it would depend on what the referendum looks like as to what participation would be, whether it's a two-stage referendum or three-part referendum, however it's built. I don't perceive it as being likely that people will just bow out of it. Right. But it is possible. I don't know. I'm not a pollster. That's not my strong point. As for how I'd vote, I'm not 100% convinced that the EU is beyond salvage. But that is my strong belief and inclination at the moment. So, as I say in the statement, I'm a Euro-federalist. I want to see a federal Europe. I just no longer believe that the EU is the path to get there. So, unless I saw extreme introspection and good faith negotiation and soul-searching from the EU between now and a second referendum, I would have to... I think vote no deal.
On your Facebook page, which is Jimmy Kent, Radical Centrist, you obviously did quite a long post on your reasons for joining. So have you become a supporter of the Brexit Party, or we will be voting for them?
I'm trying to be in touch with the campaign team so I can get out and spend this next week knocking on doors.
So you will campaign for them?
I will campaign for them, yeah.
You mentioned in that the people in the party that impressed you were, I can't remember his name, but there's the ex-civil servant, and James Wells, and there was also, of course, Claire Fox, who comes from a completely different point of view to Nigel Farage, and I imagine being an ex-Lib Dem yourself. Yeah. They're obviously standing on a manifesto that says, WTA Brexit. Why are you impressed with people like those two as opposed to the Nigel Farages and the Rees-Moggs that you mentioned?
Well, I think there's a long-standing association of certain people with the cause of Leave and the cause of Brexit. But what really impressed me, especially about Claire on her Politics Live interview, which was really the point at which the ball started rolling for me, was this idea that there is an opportunity here to create an incredibly broad tent that pulls from across the spectrum, and I think you can see that in the suite of people that are joining. So it's not just Claire, who's avowedly an ex-communist, or James Wells, who's the former head of trade for the ONS. You've also got people like Dave Bull. You have Elizabeth Babade. There is that sense that maybe if enough people stand up, because 16.8 million people voted to remain, I find it hard to believe that none or even the majority of those people are not Democrats and don't wish to respect the result, even if it didn't go the way they wanted. So the more that the party can reflect that breadth across the spectrum, the better a chance it has, A, of properly representing the people that it purports to, and secondly, of evolving into something worthwhile down the line. At the moment, it's a single-issue party. At the point that there are manifestos or policy discussions, which I've laid out my stall that I would love to be involved in policy discussions. I was the chair of the Kingston Policy Matters group for the Lib Dems, so putting forward policy ideas and assessing things and sending them to conference. I would love to be involved in those conversations, but I have no idea what it's going to become down the line, and no one does. But the more people that we can get involved, the better a chance that has of being a positive thing.
Of course, there is no manifesto at the moment, and that is one of the kind of key criticisms of the Brexit Party, that they don't have any policies as opposed to a WTO Brexit or a clean break or whatever you want to call it. That doesn't concern you ahead of these European elections?
Not insurmountably, no. I mean, it is a risk, as Claire said, it's a risk. It was a risk for me as well, of unleashing something that you're not aligned with. But I think it's quite a smart play, actually, certainly for the Europe elections, to keep it as singularly focused as it is. Until Brexit happens, achieving Brexit should be the focus of this party. And anything else that can be a distraction from that, A, risks splitting the tent, and B, risks undermining the cause. When manifesto discussions happen, or when a manifesto is published, I will reevaluate. I'm sure many people will reevaluate, as is right. The same would be true, by the way, if I'd stayed a member of the Lib Dems and they'd put out an election manifesto and I'd looked at that and said, this is not something I can put my name to.
Yeah.
And on the point of which people you align yourself with, you don't get to pick who's on your side of the argument. You only get to pick which side of the argument you think is right. And for me, I don't really have any doubts that the Brexit Party has it right on this point, and whatever else happens down the line, at the moment, standing with them is the most principled thing that I can do.
If the Brexit Party hadn't come along, obviously Nigel Farage formed this party still fairly recently. I think it was only a couple of months ago. Do you think you would have potentially stayed in the Lib Dems and kind of grin and beared it, and even though you're disagreeing with it, do you think you'd have voted for another Brexit party? Could you have seen yourself voting for the SDP or UKIP or someone like that? Or do you think you'd have just kind of stayed apathetic, or what do you think you'd have done if the Brexit Party hadn't come along? Do you think you'd be talking about this now? Or
I don't know. I mean, the spur for this was the European elections. The locals, it was a different circle to square for me, or square to circle for me, because I believe in a lot of what Lib Dems do on a local level. So when I would go out campaigning for people, even with the exit from Brexit slogan, there's only so much local councillors can do in that regard. But when we had the extension and it became clear that we were going to have to hold European elections, at that point the issue that I'd been able to sort of sideline and ignore to a degree was staring me in the face, and there was no way around it. So rather than the rise of the Brexit Party, it was this is not our campaign, this is not a platform I can stand on. So at that point I looked around, and like I said, I saw Claire's interview with Joe Coburn on Politics Live. I was like, okay, well, this seems to capture a lot of where I am for the moment. At least this is where I'm going to hang my hat, because, and I told Ed Davey, if I thought that I could have started a Lib Dems for Brexit group and had any kind of success with that, I would have done that.
There wasn't the space for that, you didn't?
I don't think so, no. And yeah, I'm on various forums with Lib Dem outlets, and I see the way people in the local party react and sort of commentary react. Stephen Lloyd was a wake-up call as well. I mean, he's a long-standing, long-serving Liberal MP.
He's not a Brexiteer, he just voted for the deal, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he committed to... Yeah, obviously Lib Dems get very sketchy about promises these days, breaking and keeping them, but he promised to vote with his constituents, and when his constituency voted leave, and the thing is, the party didn't take the whip away from him. He resigned the whip in order to not be a distraction, as I understand it. But it's pretty clear to me that the reason that would have been a problem is in no small part down to the membership. And while liberalism is built on tolerance, and I've had some fantastically supportive messages from my ex-colleagues seeking to understand, saying, you're still a Lib Dem at heart, we get it. The membership at large, I find to be very intolerant on this issue, and there's a lot of lazy thinking and demonisation of Brexit voters as being a particular kind of person or having a particular set of views. So I think even had the Brexit Party not come along, even had I stayed, if there was European elections going along, there would have been some degree of soul searching. And I don't know where it would have ended up. I don't know what I could have done in terms of voting. I mean, the SDP potentially.
Not UKIP.
I don't think so. I mean, Gerard Barton as leader and the embracing of Tory Robinson, it's too polluted for me at this point. I don't think I could see myself voting for UKIP. But then I met UKIP voters even here in Kingston, New Malden, where I was campaigning when I was running as a council candidate for the Lib Dems in the locals last year. Yeah, I met UKIP voters. Some I suspected, some who were very happy to tell me, and these are people. These are all people, and I think the othering and the dehumanization that tribalism encourages is one of the biggest problems that we have in politics at the moment.
Last things, two pretty direct questions. Could we see Jimmy Kent Brexit Party candidate in Kingston, perhaps, or anywhere?
I honestly haven't given it any thought. I mean, there haven't been any discussions in that direction. I think, as broad attempt as it is, being a Euro-federalist still puts me in a quite different position to many of the people in the party. So
okay.
It remains to be seen how much that gets embraced. But yeah.
And you mentioned Ed Davey. He could be the next Lib Dem leader. What would be your thoughts on that?
I think it'd be fantastic. I mean, Ed is a phenomenal human and one of the hardest working politicians in this country. I have nothing but respect for him, as much as we might disagree on this issue. I think he would be a fantastic leader. Jo Swinson, she's got a lot of now. She gave a very good speech at a conference a couple of times that I've seen her. And, later is very active, obviously, and always on Politics Live and making the case. But I think Ed's gravitas and his liberalism, for me, would help the Lib Dems capitalise on the resurgence that they're experiencing. Whether that will happen, I don't know. That's up to the membership.
Jimmy Kent, thank you very much.